Welcome to the Perinatal Wellbeing Podcast. I'm Christine, your host and certified perinatal mental health professional. This podcast is all about authentic conversations. We want to open up the discussions around perinatal health and well-being, from mood and anxiety disorders to breastfeeding to grief and loss in the perinatal period, and everything in between. While this is not therapy or medical advice, it is the place where we are going to continue to open up the discussion around all things perinatal mental, physical, emotional, and sexual health to help reduce stigma and break down these barriers to support. Hi, Katie. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Christine. Thanks so much for having me.
I'm so excited to have you on again because today we're going to talk about a topic that I know is close to both of our hearts, that we talk about often. So we really are trying to talk today about how body image issues are perpetuated, specifically in the perinatal period.
Okay.
Yeah, which is, can be a very big topic, and we can talk about it for days on end. So we're going to try to narrow it down a bit for today's episode, but just really to open up the discussion. So, we can, people can talk about these things more in their own circles and, with their own friends and family, I think can be helpful.
Right. Wouldn't it be nice to get to a place where we didn't have to talk about it?
Right.
But until then, I guess talking about it is the way to stop us from having to talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so, I just want to kind of add a disclaimer that, no one can see us, but both Katie and I are, we identify as white, cisgendered women, and we're really coming, from our experiences of having children and, how patriarchy has impacted us and our body image. And we speak from that lens. We can't speak from any other lenses of oppression, outside of our own experiences. And so we definitely are not trying to, and we recognize, our privilege as white women. So we will kind of jump into it. And so, Katie, how do we even broach this subject?
Well, I know for me, it's been a lifelong journey, not just in the perinatal period, but I guess I could say it was definitely perpetuated in the perinatal period. But I would say I was always described as overweight. Over whose weight, I'm not sure, but
right. Okay.
Starts, right? Those terms that are used that are really unhelpful and started my very poor relationship with my body. And I would describe it as a relationship, and that since childhood, I have been dieting from Slim Fast to Atkins to cabbage soup. I tried them all.
Yep.
And it just really started off my relationship with my body on a poor note. And so in that perinatal period, where you're weighed every doctor's appointment, there seems to be this ideal weight you should be at it during a pregnancy. I was always at the top of or over the ideal weight you should gain in a pregnancy. So it's just weight specifically has always weighed heavily on my mind, and then even more so in that perinatal period.
Right. It's not like, I think for a lot of us, that's probably familiar. I know for me, it's familiar of, it didn't just start, when I had kids and when weight was really measured very closely by healthcare professionals. Same with me, started in childhood as well. And so then we bring all of that with us into the perinatal period, which I think is hard. I know I approached it with kind of a fear of oh gosh, how much weight am I going to gain?
Right.
What is this going to look like? How big am I going to get? And I really tried to manage that with I'm having a baby. I'm growing a human, but that was hard to maintain, especially when people around me, when, friends were having babies, like they kept saying like, I'm so fat, not about me, about themselves. Like, I'm so fat, I'm getting so fat. And I'm like, but you're growing a human, like there's a human in there. It's not
Right.
just fat that you're gaining. Right.
Right.
So I think it was hard for me to maintain that like healthy, those healthy thoughts around weight gain because everyone around me, was really struggling with it too.
Well, I do wonder if that comes from a history of women being told that we should be tiny, almost like disappear, be unnoticeable, be small.
Mm,
And so big women make people uncomfortable because they take up too much space. Pregnant women are naturally bigger.
mhm.
And maybe that's part of it, is that you're taking up too much space and that makes us uncomfortable.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Wow, that's actually a really profound point. Like that, being taking up too much space and trying to be small and little, because I think is like that can be part of that idealized like feminine
Mm,
picture of
right.
a woman, first of all, a woman of like being small and being tiny. And it's like, even in pop culture or movies, like being tiny and then having a big man, kind
Right.
of, being very tall. And, so it goes both ways, right? Like I definitely see where it can affect, people who identify as men that, having to be this ideal and be tall and be strong and big to like save this little woman.
Right. Well, you and I were talking another day about ideals, right? How those ideals can just be so full of pressure and so unhealthy for us when we're striving to be this picture that was painted for us of what an ideal woman, an ideal man, an ideal color, an ideal fill in the blank would
Mhm.
look like. And it's all seems so unhealthy
Right, right.
and very geared towards the body specifically.
Mhm. And in that, like, we can use so many aspects of the body to shame or to like other people, to center people, to exclude people. Like it all comes down to that. Like you said, color, size, shape, you know, um, all the things, really, abilities, right? And Sonia Renee Taylor in her book, The Body's Not an Apology, speaks to that so well. Like I cannot recommend that book enough to people. So definitely check that out. I learned so much from that book. And that ideal, if we want to kind of focus on that feminine ideal and mother ideal, I think is heavily influenced by patriarchy.
Right.
That ideal is like to please men, to look a certain way, right? Like you said, kind of be small enough, like to not take up too much space, but be pleasing. I mean, don't be too small because you don't want to be too skinny and not attractive and
Right.
not have, the right curves or, things like that, the right assets. And I think that leads also to apologizing for our
Um,
bodies.
yeah.
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 How do
Apologizing,
you, yeah,
not just right.
exactly, exactly. How do you see that coming up, like for you or just what you've observed?
The just right part, I definitely feel this pressure that there is a just right. I guess when I was younger, I thought if I was skinnier, so there would be an apology, whether I said it or felt it, of just taking up too much space, just not being. But I have talked to so many smaller women who feel it too, and men.
Mhm.
And so I don't know that there is a right size. I don't know that there's a person that escapes this pressure. And so the apologizing for me, just shows up when I don't feel like I'm chasing. I'm going to say her because in my mind, there's this woman that has been put on a pedestal that I feel like I'm chasing, and she looks just so. And when I stop chasing her, I feel this need to apologize for letting myself go.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure where I went when I let myself go because I'm still right here, but there's this illusion that not dieting means you're fat and lazy. And as I unlearn some of that, and I become okay with taking up more space, and I become okay with letting myself go, means I've stopped chasing her, and yet I don't even think she exists.
Right. And it's when we're chasing this ideal that doesn't exist, we'll never get to it, we'll never find it, and thus we'll never be happy.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Right.
call it coming home to your body, like that
Mm.
feeling when you have been away and you just come home and you kind of like spill and you're just like totally comfortable. Like
Mm.
imagine we felt like that in our own bodies. Like it just, we were like turtles that carried around a shell that fit just right because it was our shell and
Right.
nobody else's. And so, like, just that feeling of being at home in your body, it's mine. It's so good to me. It takes care of me. It breathes for me. It moves.
Mhm.
It does what it needs to do. And that's kind of my resistance to this ideal is trying to feel at home in my body.
Yeah. Which goes against the patriarchy, really.
Mhm.
Because that, and also I think it's important to like acknowledge capitalism in here too, right? Because of these ideals that have been created to please men, then these billion-dollar industries, billions of dollars,
Mm.
have been created, right,
Mhm.
to help us, I'm using quotes here, get to that ideal body,
Right.
right? Anti-wrinkle cream, or, if we want to narrow in on the perinatal period, right? Like all the lotions that you can use to not get stretch marks, and, um, you know, diet plans and pills and workout programs and things, geared specifically for the perinatal period, whether it's like getting ready for having a kid, being pregnant, after delivery, you want to bounce back,
Yeah.
so get on this train and get to the gym, or buy this workout program, buy this diet program, this shake or pill, that will get you there faster.
Right.
Faster the better.
It's almost like erase yourself or erase the story that's written on your body. Like if you were to think of us as storybooks and everything we've been through is part of the story that's written on us, whether that's stretch marks from pregnancy or teenage years as our bodies changed, wrinkles as we age, sun marks from, you know, those beach days, like it's all just part of our story, and yet we're trained to erase and not show our story, which makes me think, like, are we supposed to be blank slates? Are we supposed to not have our story written on our body and not carry it around with pride?
Right, right. And I think if we don't, look at those things with pride, and we don't tell our stories, and we don't, rejoice in our stories, then that brings about the opportunity to engage in these things that will make us feel like we can get closer to the ideal, right? But if everyone's embracing their story and their bodies, and the stories their bodies tell, like who's gonna, buy the diet programs, and who's gonna buy the anti-wrinkle cream, and who's gonna, you know, pay for liposuction and all
Right.
those things.
Yeah, the beauty standards are profiting someone.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so what is the impact, what's the impact been for you in terms of like making and having babies? What was that like for you?
I was able to have two pregnancies without assistance. And so when I think to those times, they were simple and uncomplicated. I wasn't really sick. So it should have been full of, goodness. But I think this was the one thing. I know a lot of people struggle with a lot of things related to pregnancy, whether it's getting pregnant, staying pregnant, so many emotions for different people. But for me, it all felt good, except for don't gain too much weight.
Right.
And how do I get my body back after? Like it was almost an obsession. It still is. Like my last pregnancy was a surrogacy, and that baby was born in 2017. So I still feel post baby weight pressure on my body this many years later. Like, did I ever get my body back? No. It's changed every single pregnancy. There was times in between that I was smaller, but that doesn't mean my body was back. It just, I don't know how to say it except for that it's just a number on a scale. Like it's so uninteresting. It's like there's so much focus on weight and smooth skin and fill in the blank whiteness as good things. And it's like those things are so uninteresting. We just give them way too much attention. And so for me, that was sad because it snuck into a time where I could have really not used that extra pressure. I could have just put all of my attention on the vast change that becoming a mom and raising a newborn requires.
Right. Yeah, I definitely relate, in that sense. During pregnancy, like I said, I was really trying to manage kind of those thoughts around gaining too much weight and like trying not to be hard on myself. And I was really amazed, same, I had 3 pregnancies unassisted. They went fairly well. And I felt really thankful and grateful for that and the miracle of having a baby. I know there's been billions of babies created and born, but I really truly felt that sense of like, wow, this is incredible. What my body's doing, what this baby's doing, and all the work we're doing, until I was at my doctor's office. And that, like, every time being weighed, and I remember with my first, I did gain a lot of weight again compared to those charts and standards and stuff. And there was like an intern and a young male intern, and he said, you're gaining too much weight. You need to be careful. And I felt so ashamed. So ashamed. And I'll never forget, I walked out of there and there was a Pizza Hut in the corner, and I went to Pizza Hut and I bought a personal pan pizza and I ate it all.
Right. I'll be careful. Right. And Katie, now would want, back then you just, I don't want to say anything, but now that I'm growing and learning, and I would want to say, be careful of what?
Right.
And if he answered too much weight gain, I would say, and how come?
Yeah.
Like, what am I being careful of? What is the poor health outcome that you're worried about?
Right.
That me gaining weight would perpetuate.
Right. And, it was also very interesting because with my second pregnancy, I just really wasn't craving like sweets and like the things that I was craving with my first. And I actually ate just because I felt like it. I just felt like eating pretty well, and I gained really just basically baby weight. And lost most of it in the delivery, and he was my biggest baby. So it was super interesting that like I gained a fraction of the amount of weight that I gained with my first, and yet he was my largest baby. And then with my third, I gained probably the most weight, and he was my smallest baby.
Interesting. And did you get a lot of compliments after your second? Like, oh, you look so good. You look like you got your body back.
Yeah, definitely. Like, good for you. Oh my God, you lost your weight. Like, meanwhile, it wasn't really an effort. It was just losing weight and fluid. It was just losing baby and fluid, and like, it's nothing I had to really work for. I mean, I delivered a baby, but anyways, I did that work. So that was interesting. And so for me, though, the struggle actually really came. So it's like I worked hard to be compassionate with myself and kind to myself, like I'm growing a baby. And I viewed that like when I saw friends or family or anyone who was pregnant, like I was like, wow, it's so beautiful. It's amazing. It's lovely. Like, not even thinking about what their body looked like, just like, wow, you're having a baby. But when I delivered, the struggle really set in when I delivered, because now there's no baby. And then I was left with a very different body, and like, my stomach looking extremely different. And I did have big babies. So, a lot of like stretched out skin. And that was really, really hard for me. Really difficult.
Because of pressure? Because you were feeling pressure?
Yeah, because of pressure. Like, I really felt like I wasn't fitting into this like feminine ideal of like, this beautiful mom that has a baby and looks well, glowing. Yes. Like, I'm just like, I feel like, like, I don't know, like frumpy, and like my clothes don't fit properly because like my non-maternity clothes definitely don't fit, but my maternity clothes fit, but they don't fit the same way because I don't have a baby in there. And so it just felt awkward and uncomfortable. And like, now there's no baby here. So it's like, there's no reason that I'm quote unquote fat.
Right.
I'm just fat now.
Yeah.
And it kind of just really latched on and really was just like, now I'm fat. Right. So the whole like, oh, you had a baby just went out the window for me. Like I couldn't hold on to that compassion at all.
Or that label like a t-shirt.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. So that was definitely a struggle, the post. And I feel the same. My youngest is 10. And I still feel like I'm trying to get my body, quote unquote, back to where, I don't know, where do I want to bring it? I don't know. And it's like, I'm never reaching that ideal. And so 10 years and I'm still not happy.
Right. Which makes me think, when and will we ever be happy? And if we stop chasing ideals, could we just be happy now? Could we feel at home in our body? Could we practice some sort of body acceptance? And if not, maybe even body neutrality?
Right. Like, okay, maybe not the fake it till you make it, like love your body, but that neutrality, like it's not good or bad. It just is.
It just is.
Right. How do we do that?
That is a good question. It's something I wish I could come to you with all the amazing ways I practice. I struggle with daily. The pressure, I feel like I'm on a path of resistance and resisting the pressure. And so for me, that was a starting point of not believing the lies I've been fed over the year, that small is the only way to be beautiful. Small equals, disappearing, and that's a good thing. Trying to look to people of color, Black people specifically, for how they have fought systems of oppression and fought back to get some sort of power, and borrowing from them some ways to fight this system of oppression. I'm reading a book currently called Decolonizing Wellness, and that's been really helpful in exploring this topic. I look to some people who are practicing intuitive eating, just trying to find ways to trust my body again, because after so many years of feeling that pressure or that chasing that ideal, what would it feel like just to trust that my body knows best for my body?
Right.
And these are all great concepts. They're just harder to practice, but I talk about it a lot. I find a lot of the people who come see me in my counseling practice, I see a lot of women, and they tend to, all ages and sizes, bring this topic up. And so it's on my mind a lot. And I would love to see women get free. I would love to, like I said at the beginning, that this wouldn't have to be talked about, because it was just so normal for us to just be. But like I said, I think talking about it right now is important as we start resisting some of the pressure. And for me right now, that's just kind of questioning things. So when it's like, being bigger is a poor health outcome. Is it? Is there research to prove that? Because a lot of the things I'm reading are saying, no, it doesn't equal poor health outcomes. If I were to not have bad foods and good foods, would I just binge on bad foods? No, that's actually not been the case. And so just kind of resisting in small ways the lies that I've been fed.
Right.
And then, like we talked about, also just trying to find that body neutrality for me, it's through body acceptance and gratitude. So the acceptance just being like, this is where I am. I don't currently have a goal because it takes me out of where I am. I know a lot of people do have health goals, and I'm not against them. But for me, it just takes me out of where I am today. And part of acceptance for me is just being happy in the body that I'm in today.
Right.
And the gratitude is around being thankful for other things that my body does for me besides just how it looks. Like, thank you for moving. Thank you for breathing. Thank you for, so that there's not so much focus on body image as much as body being a great shell for my soul.
Right. And I'm wondering, how can we bring that into the perinatal period? Like I said, if that was so helpful for me in pregnancy, and just so interesting that it completely disappeared for me after delivery. And the fact that I had a child still remained, and yet I didn't see my body as like this, great thing that helped me to bring a child into the world.
Right.
I didn't appreciate it. I wasn't grateful for it the same way I was during pregnancy.
Oh, yeah. So how could we carry that? Almost like an awe. Like when you were pregnant, you felt this awe, like, oh my goodness, look at how my body is doing this.
Yes. Like a reverence.
A reverence.
Yeah. And how can we hold on to that? Yeah.
I remember feeling that extremely after the surrogacy, because there was not only my body, but science working together to bring this life. And I can remember feeling that awe. And I think when we're in awe and we're in gratitude, it's hard to be anywhere else.
Right.
So if we can stay in that place of gratitude, thankfulness, even if we're not always in awe of our body, but just in thankfulness, it's hard to hate yourself at the same time.
Right. Absolutely. Trying to focus on those things that our body has done. Because I think that notion of gaining weight before having kids, way before, even as a young kid, as a teenager, early 20s, before having kids, the notion of gaining weight was the worst thing of all.
Right.
It superseded anything else, going on in my life. Right. And then even, now where I've had periods of weight gain, maybe through stressful times, or, I've done, working on things and not paying as much attention maybe to my health, or maybe, emotional eating a little more to manage my stress. The weight gain superseded anything that I maybe accomplished or did in that same period of time.
Right.
And so now I'm just kind of putting two and two together as we're talking, that even though I had a baby, I was no longer pregnant. So the fact that I had gained so much weight superseded the fact that I had given birth to a human and, grew him and brought him into this world. Because that focus on what we look like, was so, and it wasn't like I was saying, oh no, maybe I'm going to be unhealthy, or maybe I'm going to have negative health outcomes because of this weight I've gained. It was, no, I look gross. Yeah. It was really about the image.
How sad is it that is the worst possible outcome? And you think, if we could stop seeing that as the worst possible outcome and come to terms with weight as just weight, then we have this body gratitude or neutrality and healthy relationship with our body. And then when terrible outcomes do really happen, like I know for women who experience infertility, they feel disconnected from their body because it's not doing what they wanted it to. Or people with pain, they feel disconnected from their body because it's not operating the way they want it to. Then I feel like we could actually apply these same strategies to when poor outcomes really do happen, because weight isn't a poor outcome. We've trained ourselves to believe it is the worst possible outcome. But then when these things do happen, we have skills and tools to reconnect with our body no matter what it does, and to trust our body, and because there are things that happens to our bodies that are tough to deal with. And we can use those same tools to reconnect with our body after we feel like it's not working properly.
Right. Absolutely.
The outcomes that we wanted.
And I was thinking about that in terms of course, like people that I've worked with that have had, struggled with fertility challenges, and, even people that have, where delivery, didn't go the way that they wanted it to go, or they thought it would go, right? We know labor and delivery, can be really, really hard and unpredictable and unexpected. And having, traumatic birth, or, then struggling perhaps with nursing afterwards. And so this constant feeling of like, my body is not performing the way I want it to. I think that in the perinatal period can be pretty big and pretty present. This negativity towards our body, and it's not doing what it's supposed to do. And I think that these ideal images of like what a parent is, what a mother is, has impacts on that. A natural mother, and I'm using quotes here, no one can see it, but quote unquote, a natural mother, quote unquote, breastfeeds, right? Whereas when we struggle with that, like I did, it feels like, oh, I was questioning my femininity.
And you weren't living up to the ideal.
That's right. Yeah. So I mustn't be feminine enough, motherly enough, naturally motherly, all of those things.
There's that pressure again. I feel like that pressure is just it's like toxic. It's poison for us. And
Yeah.
every time we feel that pressure and we absorb that pressure, it's like this poison going through our bodies that causes us to disconnect from our bodies. And if our body is our firstborn relationship and our last relation, like it is our most consistent, it's the relationship we need to nurture the most. And this poison is just causing a sever between us and our bodies. And if we can get to a place where we're not so severed, then when these tough things do happen, like for you not being able to breastfeed, for women who struggle to get pregnant, like for pain, so many trauma, like so many things that we hold in our body.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't have the poison, then we can just focus on healing what's actually happening rather than the pressure. The pressure takes up too much room. The poison takes up too much room. And then we can't heal what's actually happening.
Right. And exactly, like that's the impact of that poison, and thus like protecting ourselves from that poison, we disconnect.
Yeah.
And so if we're not connected, we can't know what we need.
Yeah. Right. Good point. Yeah. How do we check in? How do we trust when people say do intuitive eating and you think, oh my goodness, I could never do that. I could never trust myself. That's interesting. If we aren't connected, then that would feel scary.
Absolutely. And so, I think slowly, trying to reconnect with ourselves, and like you said, even trying to come to that neutrality first before, launching into like, I love myself and I love my body and it's so beautiful. Like when you don't really believe that, but even just trying to connect, I mean, that's mindfulness, right? Is just being present with what is.
Yeah.
And, okay, right now, this is how I feel.
Yeah.
Maybe I feel tired. I feel sluggish because of I'm not consuming maybe the most nutritious food that would help me feel less sluggish or whatever. This is what my body's currently doing. Doesn't mean I want to necessarily stay here forever. And I think speaking to that like goals aspect, because I struggle with that. I'm an all or nothing thinker. So I can go from like no goals, no nothing to like, okay, let's train for a half marathon and, do all the things.
Mm-hmm.
So trying to fight against that, like giving into an exercise plan or a diet plan. But we can say, well, I want to take care of my body. I want to feel well. And I don't need to do it overnight, or, staying present and mindful. Like, so we experience what our body's experiencing right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But we don't have to say like, oh, I want to stay here forever. I just noticed this is how I feel. And maybe I can do this thing today to feel a little bit better, or I can do these stretches, or I can eat an apple today, or I can take my vitamin, or whatever that looks like.
And notice the difference as you were saying those things, they were for you. It was you taking care of you because that's what worked best for you and your body because you were reading it, rather than beauty standards or health pressures or diet culture being for someone else, chasing something because someone told me I had to. To me, those external pressures are what produce poor health outcomes and produce poor wellness outcomes because it's a chasing.
Yes.
Rather than you saying, I'm going to choose to eat this apple because I know it makes me feel really good and because it's what my body wants right now. Still might be the same thing as on a diet plan, but the motivation is completely different.
Right.
It's hard to separate the two.
Absolutely. It is so hard, like you said, because, for intuitive eating, I mean, I don't have a lot of practice with this, but like, of course, like I've eaten things for my wellness, but like you said, they can be the same thing. Right. But, knowing like I'm eating this because it feels good, it tastes good. I know that I'm not going to be bloated afterwards or like have pain, in my joints or whatever, because I'm eating this thing. But when we're doing it on a plan, there's like so much room for failure there. And then I think that like toxic like that toxicity can come in again, right? Of like, well, I didn't follow this plan exactly, like this postpartum plan, for example, after baby to like get my body back in quotes. So I failed. I didn't hit that ideal, or like I didn't do well today. So like I'm not good enough because I'm not following this plan perfectly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like how many times have you said to yourself, I know I've said it many times, like, I'll have to pay for what I just ate,
Yes.
or I'll work that off tomorrow, or I'll start over tomorrow. Today was a bad day, but I'll start over tomorrow. So to me, that's all living for tomorrow, as if my body will be better once I have it under control. But then what happens to today? I'm not living because I'm outside of my body. I'm outside of today. I'm in tomorrow thinking that I'm chasing.
Yes.
And to me, the chasing is part of the poison. It's like, what about if today I was just in my body and feeling at home and listening to it and trusting it? I know I make this sound very easy. What if I just felt at home? But the concepts, I think, sound easy, but could be life-changing, specifically for women in that perinatal period, because there's just so much pressure to have our body look a certain way, when in reality, our body has been through this life-changing experience, and it shouldn't have to be anything other than changed.
Right. Change can be okay.
Yeah, this experience changed my body. Of course it did. And that's amazing. Like, why do we, all other things that change us, have some acceptance to it? If we had a surgery, we would take time to recover from it. And, we wouldn't expect that after knee surgery that your knee just bounced. Did you get your knee back?
Right. Actually, no, I didn't. I got a new one, right?
Yeah. So I don't know. I just feel like the resistance is so important, because we've just been fed so many lies. And anytime there's this many lies, it just requires resistance and almost like a fight to get back to a place where it's okay to just be.
Right. It's okay to be in this pregnant body or this postpartum body. It's okay to be where I'm at right now. And over time, my body is going to shift and change to its new kind of quote unquote normal, right? Like, postpartum, of course, there's going to be like shifts and change, our organs are going to go back into place and all those other things, and our fluid levels and blood levels and all that stuff are going to kind of come back to like post or pre-pregnancy, right? The way it, is meant to, but it's not necessarily about how we look.
Right.
I mean, hopefully if we could change that. And because I think, like you said, all these lies we've been fed, like we have to get back to that feminine ideal. We have to, either still look like this beautiful mother who has given birth but doesn't look like she's given birth.
Right.
Right. Like have all the kids and, nurse them and go through all these major changes, but your body shouldn't look like it's been through all these changes. Right. Yeah. Use all the lotions and potions to not get stretch marks, lose the weight. I mean, don't gain too much weight in the first place. Whatever weight you have left, lose it quickly. That 6-week mark, get back to that exercise,
Yeah. While you're at it, don't age either, because that's not.
Exactly.
That's frowned upon too.
That's right. Don't get wrinkles from not sleeping for months on end. Don't get, stress lines from not sleeping. And like make it look effortless, make it look beautiful while you're doing it. This image of like, I've talked about this before, but like, a mother nursing her child with long flowing, beautiful hair, just this epitome of femininity. But then there's also this pressure to become a mom and like fully embrace that, in the sense of like, now you're kind of not as valuable to the white man in terms of like sexuality, in terms of the male gaze. Like, you're not, if you're a mom, you don't turn heads anymore. There's of course jokes about, you know, mom bods and dad bods even, and, you know, wearing mom jeans and living in yoga pants, and just, you know, kind of resign yourself to like not being a sexual being anymore. Like, now you're just having sex if you want to procreate, and that's about it. Hide your sexuality. Moms being sexual is gross. That's a whole, I think, a whole piece to it. What do you think about that?
Well, once again, I hear hide yourself.
Yeah.
Like I said, if our body is a story and it's telling all the different parts of us, hiding it to me is just sad. It's just be a blank slate or give in to the pressure of what you should look like. So none of those things include just being and being the expression of who you think you are. All of those things include either be a blank slate or chase after this ideal.
Mm-hmm.
And both to me are sad. Both to me are signs of women just losing themselves.
Yes. Yeah. Because once you become a mom, that quote unquote should, you know, there's that shame word, right? Should be your whole identity.
Mm-hmm.
You're not a woman. You're not Katie. You're not Christine. You're just a mom. That should be your first priority. That should be your whole identity. You know, that should be your main focus.
Mm-hmm.
And also the opposite of that, of course, you know, the hypersexualization, you know, of, for example, MILFs, right? Like, you could be on the other end of the spectrum where you're a mom, and if you're super gorgeous and really hot, then you can be attractive,
right,
to men, and you can be pleasurable for men, right?
Right.
There's no happy medium in there.
Right. I would love to know, like, if we're chasing, when do we arrive? When does the chase end? And I would argue that it doesn't. The chasing is how this is perpetuated by white supremacy, by the patriarchy. It's like, if you just keep chasing, then capitalism and the beauty standards profit. Then the white man profits. Like, the chasing is how it is perpetuated. So what would it look like if we stop chasing?
Right. And so have you had any success in any areas not chasing? What's that been like for you?
For me right now, I write. That's how I sort through this. It's messy. It's not easy. Like I said, it sounds, when you talk about it, it sounds like 1, 2, 3, and you can just fight against this, but it's not easy. It's a struggle. It's a daily struggle for me. Mm-hmm. And writing gets it out of me. It's like my internal rebellion. It's my way of trying to resort through the information I've been given and figure out, what do I think about this? How can I resist this? What could I do differently? And so it comes out in poems right now for me. But that's been my way of sorting through it and trying to figure out, and then talking about it, really making it a priority to talk about it with other women, to bring it up in my counseling practice. What's your relationship like with your body is one of my first questions. Right. Because I just think that's so important for all of us, just to be talking about it.
Absolutely. It is so important, and has such big impacts on us, right? I mean, obviously not just in the perinatal period, but our whole lives. But in that recovery piece, you know, whether we're recovering from pregnancy, delivery, you know, and of course, if there's been any complications, or like, our body is so implicated in that. And if our relationship with our body is unhealthy, you know, or abusive, then that recovery is going to be affected, potentially slower or more difficult, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think, I talk about like when we disconnect from emotions, for example, people who struggle with managing emotions or feeling emotions, right? They're not used to feeling emotions. So they say, okay, not consciously, but I disconnect from emotions, bad emotions, quote unquote, sadness, grief, guilt, whatever. Well, we can't pick and choose what emotions we disconnect from.
Right.
And I really feel like that's the same for a body. Like we can't, if we choose to disconnect from our body because of our weight, we can't just say, okay, I'm disconnecting from thinking about my weight. We're disconnecting from our whole body.
Yeah.
And so whatever experiences we have using our body, we're going to be disconnected from that or not engaged because we're disconnected.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
To me, the antithesis of disconnect is to trust or reconnect.
Mm-hmm.
What would that, to me, that's the work. How do you reconnect? Yes. How do you trust?
Yes. And so I think, like you said, right, I think that first part is maybe like realizing, okay, what am I chasing here? I'm chasing this ideal that was created by someone else for profit. It's not my ideal. Recognizing that, and then, like you said, doing the work of kind of coming back online, reconnecting with our body, and then slowly coming to that body neutrality, like reconnecting in our experiences and starting to trust ourselves.
Yeah.
Because we know what's best, not some random one size fits all diet plan or workout plan,
Right.
So yeah, I think they're very big and complicated and difficult steps, but I think the work is there, and people can kind of maybe use that as a framework, and then do that work in the way they need, whether it's like self-help books or, talking with friends, peer groups, or therapist, or whatever that looks like, and doing that.
Yeah, it's work that needs to be done. It's like a collective resistance. The more we can do it together, the more we can fight this. And it does become a moot point. It does become just something we don't need to talk about one day.
Right, exactly. And that's why I wanted to talk about it today, to, for us to open up the discussion, for more people to talk, like, let's talk about these things and join that collective, right, of people that are already out there talking about these things, and like be involved in this stuff, keeping it at the forefront so that we can try to stop chasing these ideals.
Yeah.
I think, the ideal, right, could be, what's the ideal for my body? Like, not the ideal as something outside of me that's like a white woman with smooth skin who doesn't have freckles like I do, who's thin but not too thin, long, beautiful hair, et cetera, et cetera. Well, what's the ideal for my body?
Or what if ideal is exactly who you are right now today? There was no chasing.
Right. See how, like, I easily got sucked back into it, right?
You're like, but I got to chase something.
Yeah, I have to chase something. How can I not chase, Katie? Yes, that is a good point. So, like you mentioned before, you're not against, having health goals and stuff. So how do we reconcile that when we've like been told, like, we have to make plans, we have to set goals? I've been told so many times, you can't set a goal, and you can't reach a fitness goal, for example, whether it's weight or strength or how you look, without a goal, without a plan. So how do we do that?
When I explain mindfulness to people, I explain Imagine you were sitting in a room with two windows, and you're sitting in that room, all you have is that room. So that's mindfulness, is just being in that room. But it does have the two windows. So there's one to the right, that's your future. And there's one to your left, that's your past. And I know we say mindfulness is being 100% present, but I would argue that it's being 90% present. And that we're always taking a peek out our future window 5% of the time, just to kind of make some plans and goals. And, groceries don't get bought if there's not a list. So we got to peek out that window. Yep. We got to peek out into our past, because we can learn from our past. There's things that we do take with us. So don't forget to peek out that window 5% of the time. But 90% of the time, just be in this room, just be in this body.
Right.
Exactly as it is today.
Right. And then how do we cope when that feels really uncomfortable? If our body, for example, if it feels different from when we first disconnected from our body, if it doesn't feel like that ideal that we're used to chasing, how do we cope with that?
I think we've been trained that when things are uncomfortable, we run from them. So we make a goal, we make a plan, right? So what if we just, like pain is another one. When we have pain, we hold our breath. We try to get rid of our pain. What if we sat with our pain? What if we breathed into our pain? There's so much research to say that actually our pain gets less. And so when we feel those discomforts, whatever they are, my body doesn't fit, my body's not doing what I want it to do, my body's not performing, my body's not ... If we could sit with it and accept it, and I'm not saying accept it like, whatever it is, what it is, but more like acknowledge it, like, here you are, infertility. Here you are, the weight that I am. Here you are, my clothes don't fit in my closet. Whatever it is, and just sit with it. Then our relationship with it might actually change. It might not be bad. It might just be.
Right. I love that, because if you are listening and you are someone who has been to therapy or you've been dealing with mental health issues, then that concept is something that is so helpful when we're managing, like I said, anything kind of mental health related. I talk about that in my practice all the time, right? Of like, for example, sitting with anxiety, right? Acknowledging it. We're not trying to get rid of anxiety. We need it for survival, but we want to acknowledge it so we understand like what it's trying to tell us, and then hopefully we can help to minimize it. Same goes with managing emotions. It's the exact same set of skills. Let's acknowledge the emotion, sit with the emotion, notice what we're feeling physically, emotionally, mentally, what thoughts are coming up, and then what can I do to take care of myself if I need to, if I'm struggling with something or going through something difficult. So if you're someone who's, learned those skills or currently has those skills, well, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. I love what you said. We can just actually take those skills that a lot of us already possess and use it in the same way here. And thank you for that, because I see where I don't sit with the discomfort of my body. It doesn't feel right. It's not the ideal. It's not what I want it to be. It's not performing the way I want it to, the way it used to when I could, squat 100 pounds or whatever, right? Okay, I can barely squat without weights now. So that feels crappy. So I need to chase a plan, chase a goal, do something. What I'm doing right now is not good enough.
Right.
But I can sit with anxiety. I can sit with, I acknowledge anxiety and, sit with it and talk to it and befriend it.
Right.
So that is Thank you for this therapy session.
You're very welcome.
I'm going to try that. But I love that as a framework, and hopefully like something that like people can take away. So, kind of just to summarize what we've talked about. And again, like we said at the beginning, right? We can definitely talk about this topic for like hours and days on end. But today, really just kind of like exploring this in the context of the perinatal period, and we talked about seeing how patriarchy has influenced us and created, and capitalism too, created this ideal of what, we're supposed to look like when we have babies, after having babies, to be able to sell us products and, get us to make other people comfortable with our bodies, right? And it's had all these major impacts just on us, in this discussion, and how we dealt with our bodies in the perinatal period. And so then looking at how do we move forward, having these discussions, talk about it, let's talk openly. And like you were talking about, Katie, of reconnecting. So reconnecting to the body, being mindful, like this is where I'm at. This is what I'm sitting with right now. And then sitting with that discomfort, and then trying to, I think self-soothing is part of that in a healthy way, self-soothing when I feel that discomfort, and then building that relationship back with ourself, learning to trust ourselves so we can get to that point where, okay, now I can trust myself without the plan, without the, you have to do this postpartum or eat this specific way during pregnancy or whatever to look a certain way. I can trust myself to know what my body needs to feel well.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's write a book. Let's get that out there. And no, I'm only joking. No, we're not going to profit off of that. I'm only joking. I'm going to
actually 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And so I think like acknowledging that, like, we're having the discussion, and I myself came up with some like kind of aha moments, right? Of like, oh, wait, maybe I could do this. Right. So like I said, yeah, reaching out for support, talking to friends and family members, getting a therapist, or reading self-help books that feel like they fit with your values and goals, right? I don't mean to perpetuate, this diet culture, but like in terms of reconnecting to yourself and trusting yourself, getting support in this work, because it is super hard.
Yes.
It's one discussion and done.
Right. For me, it's daily.
Yes. Yeah.
It's just this gentle resistance. Like for me, being angry resistant doesn't help me, but being a gentle, I'm also raising 2 girls. And so there's, this mama bear protective resistance on their behalf that comes up for me.
Yes.
But yeah, just this gentle resistance towards things I've been told, things I've been taught, things I've absorbed. Not that it was anyone's fault, just the way I came into this world and things that were said to me along the way. And sometimes it's about unlearning. And I have a poem here if you want me to read it.
Absolutely. Please do.
My gentle resistance.
Yeah.
It's called The Neighbor. Extra is seen as a sign of abundance, a gift of extravagance, a blessing. Unless it's on our hips, then it's worn like an outcast. Diet culture is all formulas. None of them coincide with the next. A scientific nightmare of chaotic guessing and scrambling for the magical cure. Losing weight is a cultural obsession, ludicrous once we escape it. Why do we have this desire to be smaller? Why don't we value the space that we hold? The amount of diet gimmicks marketed to help us look a certain way, when all the body wants is to hear us say that we love the way it does. Weight is not something to be conquered, nor an indicator of success or beauty. Our bodies are not machines, but rather containers for the soul. Imagine loving your body as it was, as it is, and as it will be, acknowledging its unique build and never comparing it to yesterday, tomorrow, or to the neighbor.
That is beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that, Katie. I love that. That's such a beautiful way to connect to yourself.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. It's for me. I write them for me.
Yeah, which is lovely, which is so great. And I think that's another, like, we could talk about that for ours too, of how to connect to ourselves, but, doing things that we love, that make us feel good, that, for example, can be outlets for all these thoughts and feelings that we have with whatever's going on with us, can be such a powerful way to connect to the self.
Definitely.
Yeah, I love it. Well, thank you so much, Katie, for talking with me about this topic. And I know we could continue to keep talking. But for now, we've started the discussion, and it was a good one. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. Please share this podcast with any of your friends or family members who may benefit from it. If you feel you are experiencing any of the symptoms or issues that we discussed today, please reach out to any one of your supports or go to perinatalwellbeing.ca for more information, blog posts, podcast episodes, and ways to connect with us. Check out our new episode every other Monday.